So I've been watching a lot of these iceberg videos recently. If you're not aware of them, essentially they go over these images, which pick a particular topic and place various pieces of knowledge, including theories or obscure trivia, on this image of an iceberg. The lower you go, the less well-known and often creepier they become. These kind of became popular with the advent of this Mario 64 themed iceberg, and they're very addicting. But I noticed a problem. A lot of the big important things in this world have iceberg videos. Mario, Sonic, YouTube, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, showers. But there are some holes in this ecosystem. Horrifyingly, despite there being two distinct iceberg images for the franchise on the internet, there were no Pac-Man Iceberg videos. I wept. Until I realized that I make videos all the time. Most of the time. And I like Pac-Man. I know a pretty good amount about Pac-Man. I looked at both charts and found the one from Reddit, created by user SniperKing64, really interesting. I figured I'd reach out and ask him if I could go ahead and use it. Partially because I thought it would be good to get permission, and partially because some of these entries go so deep that even I, the disappearance of Miss Pac-Man guy, didn't know what they were referring to. Sniper King went above and beyond with his helpful explanation, so I would like to extend to him my sincerest thank you. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Level 1. Pac-Man. Pac-Man was the original name of Pac-Man, which was used for the original Japanese arcade release. Probably because, you know, Pac-Man looks like a hockey puck. Unfortunately, when Midway brought the game over to America, they were quite afraid that those dirty-minded, delinquent arcade goers would change the P to an F, rendering Pac-Man's name as something else. Something dirty. Because of this, it was changed to Pac-Man in future releases, which we'll talk more about in a bit. This is memorably referenced by the title character of the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels and movie.
Hey, you know Pac-Man?
I know of him.
Well, Pac-Man was originally called Puck-Man, and that they were worried people would scratch out the P, turn it into an F, like...
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'll leave you alone forever now.
Thanks.
256. Infamously, while Pac-Man at first seems like a game that will continue forever, it actually does have a definitive ending. Kind of. If you can manage to get to the 256th level, you'll be greeted with a glitchy mess that is quite literally impossible to beat. In part because it tries to kill you at random, and in part because some of the dots are completely inaccessible. Much like the Minus World from Super Mario Bros., this has become something of an inside joke with retro gamers and Pac-Man fans, to the point where not one, but two official games with the title Pac-Man 256 have been created. One for iOS, Android, PC, Mac, PS4, and Xbox One, and another for the Pac-Man Connect and Play plug-and-play console. Pizza shape. There's a pretty famous story about how Pac-Man creator Toru Iwatani came up with the idea for Pac-Man's iconic design after seeing a pizza with a slice removed from it, and thinking it looked like a character eating. This story, by Iwatani's own admission, is actually only half true. Here's a quote from the man himself upon being asked about it by Susan Lammers for an interview used in her 1986 book Programmers at Work, which she made available on her blog of the same name.
Well, it's half true. In Japanese, the character from mouth, kuchi, is a square shape. It's not circular like the pizza, but I decided to round it out.
Paku Paku. Pac-Man's name is derived from Paku Paku, which is a Japanese onomatopoeia used for the mouth opening and closing. Iwatani actually confirms this in that very same interview. Paku 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 Paku. Ghost AI. So the idea of this is that each ghost's nickname is a hint for the player as to how their AI works, because every ghost behaves differently. Blinky's nickname is Shadow because he's always in your shadow, very directly pursuing you throughout the game. Pinky's nickname is Speedy because she likes to be one step ahead of you, positioning herself about 32 pixels in front of Pac-Man. Inky and Clyde are a little confusing though. Inky's nickname is Bashful because while he follows Pac-Man like Blinky does, he tries to stay further away, approximately twice as far away as Blinky is from Pac-Man. Clyde is Pokey because while he tries to follow Pac-Man like Blinky does, he gets scared if he comes within 8 tiles of Pac-Man and tries to run to the bottom of the screen. I thought initially that he was called Pokey because he was slow, and I guess that's true, but they mean like slow of the mind, like he's stupid. Clyde is dumb. I got a lot of this info from a wonderful video on the channel today I found out, which I definitely recommend if you want to learn about the intricacies more. Google Pac-Man. On May 21st, 2010, Google's logo was transformed into a playable Pac-Man game in celebration of the original arcade game's 30th anniversary. They kept this archive too. You can still find it even though it's not the homepage anymore. I used to play it quite a bit in elementary and middle school. Disney cameos. So this refers to the fact that there are 2 Disney movies with Pac-Man cameos, cameos. First off, in the movie Tron, you can see Pac-Man ready to eat some dots in this scanner. Secondly, in Wreck-It Ralph, there's actually a couple things. First off, the man, the myth, the legend, Clyde himself runs the villain meetings and actually gets some speaking lines. In fact, those villain meetings actually take place in the Pac-Man arcade game. He, along with Inky, Blinky, and Pinky, make some other assorted cameos in Game Central Station, the hub area of the arcade, throughout the film and its sequel. Pac-Man himself also turns up in both films, most notably at Felix's party in the first movie. There's also a photo of Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man as Ralph leaves the villain meeting. I pronounced it right this time. You happy? Ms. Pac-Man and even Pac-Man Jr. are also mentioned by Vanellope in the sequel. The conclusion here is that Wreck-It Ralph, being based largely around arcade games, loves Pac-Man. There was also a crossover mobile game to promote the sequel, but that's a bit beyond the scope of this point. With that, let's move on to the second level of the iceberg. Stage 2, ready. 3,333,360. This is the highest score you can possibly achieve on the original unmodified Pac-Man arcade game. Billy Mitchell was allegedly the first to achieve this score on July 3rd, 1999. Mitchell is a controversial figure because of some of his world records being disputed and potentially illegitimate, but as far as I can tell, this one was legit, as it was witnessed directly by others and recorded by the Fun Spot arcade it took place in, as well as Twin Galaxies, a company that functions as the official supplier of video game world records to Guinness World Records, and he replicated the score on Twitch in 2019. So I guess we'll let Garrett Bobby Ferguson have this one. Pac-Man Fever. Song. Pac-Man Fever is a song by the musical duo Buckner and Garcia that was released in December 1981 at the height of, Pac-Man Fever. The song is told from the perspective of someone who is very addicted to the original arcade game. They fill this song with that hot Pac-Man terminology, talking about the ghost patterns and name-dropping them. Weirdly, they mostly use the ghost nicknames like Speedy and Pokey, but they just use Blinky's actual name. Gotta brush up on their lore. They even go as far as to use sound effects from the game itself. The song actually did rather well, peaking at number 9 on the American Billboard Hot 100 chart. They tried to recapture the success by recording a song about Donkey Kong, followed by an entire album called Pac-Man Fever, featuring more songs about other arcade games. I'm not entirely clear on why the one about Frogger is called Froggy's Lament, but it certainly is. Atari Landfill. This one may require a bit of context if you haven't already heard about it. First of all, from 1983 to 1985, the US video game industry experienced a recession. There are a couple major factors, but it can largely be boiled down to a console market flooded with a ton of home consoles that weren't all that different and a bunch of garbo games pumped out quickly to make it a money. This culminated in the now legendary Atari video game burial of 1983. Atari went to a New Mexico landfill site and literally buried a bunch of games that were either poorly received or overproduced. While Pac-Man wasn't the only title buried, it was a particularly infamous one. Because of the success of the original arcade game, Atari expected their own home port of Pac-Man to sell well. So well, apparently, that they produced 12 million cartridges, even though there were only around 10 million Atari 2600 consoles in homes. What didn't help this already poor decision was that this port of Pac-Man was rushed and played like, garbage. So it was buried, like garbage. The funny thing is that Pac-Man still became the console's best-selling title after shipping 7 million units, and even then, Atari was still left with 5 million unsold carts. We didn't really know the scope of this landfill dump or even how true it was at all for years, because it became a truly mythical story, passed down from gamer to gamer for years until 2014, when a documentary was produced where that landfill was dug up. It's called Atari Game Over, and while I haven't seen it, Sniper King has, and recommends it. Pretzels are fruit. This refers to the fact that, among the other fruit featured in Ms. Pac-Man, there's just a damn pretzel. According to GCC, pretzels are fruit. Thanks, GCC. Drug comparisons.
Whoa! Holy shit!
This refers to the old internet joke about how power pellets are actually drugs and the ghosts are hallucinations. Reminds me of this boomer meme where Pac-Man is compared to rave culture. Crazy Otto. I talked about this in my Ms. Pac-Man video. Essentially, before Ms. Pac-Man was Ms. Pac-Man, it was planned to be something of a mod kit for the original arcade machine, developed by a company called GCC, who primarily made mod kits for arcade games. But, oh no! While Crazy Otto was being developed, they were sued by Atari over Super Missile Attack, which was a mod kit they made for Atari's game Missile Command. As part of the legal agreement with Atari, GCC was no longer allowed to make such enhancement kits without permission from the original developers. So they presented Crazy Otto to Midway, the American distributors of Pac-Man at the time, and it was eventually reworked into Ms. Pac-Man. Thanks, GCC. Unironically this time. Creepy the Ghost. Creepy is a ghost who's exclusive to the Minecraft X Pac-Man DLC. Yes, really. He's a green ghost who looks and acts like a creeper. In the words of Sniper King 64 in the notes that he provided me, he's one creepy boy. Turn to Blue. This is the name of a spirit from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's a sprite of a blue ghost. Turn to Blue is also the name of a trophy from Super Smash Bros. For 3DS, depicting the same thing. Modern LCD versions. Pac-Man's been adapted into standalone handheld LCD games many times over the years. The one Sniper King chooses to highlight here is one created by the company Basic Fun, which has been manufactured in both full color and black and white versions. You can get it for under $20. I've checked out some footage of it on YouTube, and while it looks pretty cheap, it does seem to get the job done. The sound is also a lot less ear bleedy than most of these things are. Stupid. Clyde's Japanese name, Guzata, is sometimes translated as stupid. Ghostly Adventures seem to just run with this, given his personality.
It's tearing me apart! Snap out of it!
Pac-Man board game. In 1982, Milton Bradley released a board game adaptation of the original Pac-Man. You and your friends play as 4 different Pac-Men, eating marbles and avoiding ghosts. I've never played the game myself, but while I love the aesthetic of it, I haven't really heard good things, either from Sniper King or from online reviews. It seems like it's kind of a mess and not particularly accurate to the source material. There's also a similar Ms. Pac-Man board game from the same year. In addition to having his own Monopoly variant, there is also an additional Pac-Man board game from 2019 created by the company Buffalo Games. In this game, one player plays as Pac-Man and the others are the ghosts trying to catch him. Pac-Man eats dots to get points. Each player gets to have a turn as Pac-Man, and whoever gets the most points as him wins. This game seems to have been received a lot better than the Milton Bradley one, though again, I haven't played it. General Pac-Man. In the Futurama episode, Anthology of Interest 2, there's a machine called the What If machine, and if you ask it what if questions, it'll show you, in video form, the answer. One segment in this episode focuses on Fry asking to see a universe that's more like a video game, because video games are the only things he's good at. In this simulation, Donkey Kong, Q*bert, and the player character from Berserk invade the Earth, and Fry is recruited to help stop it under the command of Colin Pac-Man, who is Pac-Man, but as a disgruntled war veteran with a general's hat. He gets shot by Space Invader and dies days before he's intended to retire. Amy is later shown attempting to comfort Ms. Pac-Man. World's biggest Pac-Man. This is an HTML5 browser game that was developed by the now defunct Australian company Soap Creative. It was released on April 13th, 2011. The game is a very accurate recreation of the arcade original, with the twist that anyone who has a Facebook account can create and upload their own mazes. Think of this as Pac-Man Maker. When you finish a maze, you can go through any of the warps to reach a new level. Also, in a point of confusion for me, there is an arcade machine called World's Largest Pac-Man. Now, this isn't actually the same thing. This is instead the original Pac-Man game, but big. It's an enhanced version, though. You can do 2-player multiplayer, the fruits bounce around like in Ms. Pac-Man, and if you enter the curse word as your name, it'll replace it. Super duper fun. There used to be one of these by my house. Never got to try it. I don't know if it's still there just because of the pandemic. I've not been to that arcade since. I don't know if it's still open. Hopefully. I would love to try it someday. Intermission! Stage 3. Ready. Ghost with a flamethrower. This comes from a personal anecdote of Sniper King's. He used to think that the picture of the hunter enemy from Pac-Man World 2 that was featured in the game's manual looked like it was shooting fire. The twist? There is no picture of this enemy in the manual. He did provide me with another cool piece of trivia about this enemy, though. If you're unfamiliar, the hunter enemy is a gray ghost that appears exactly one time in the whole game in the Canyon Chaos level. That is, if you're not living in Japan, because for whatever reason, the hunter enemy is replaced by a purple ghost in that country's version of the game. This strikes me as especially odd because the game launched in Japan after the US, so it's not like they simply added that enemy later. I wonder if the gun was maybe a bit too much. Also, another note that I learned while looking into this piece of trivia. Despite also releasing on the GameCube, PC, and Game Boy Advance in other territories, and Xbox only in North America, Pac-Man World 2 is a PS2 exclusive in Japan. Japan. Makes sense that the Xbox and GBA versions didn't come over, but it does kind of suck that the GameCube didn't get any World 2 love in Pac-Man's home country. And while we're on the subject of Pac-Man games that didn't get love in his home country, Pac-Man Fever game. Good God, I've been wanting to talk about this game ever since I bought it for $8 at a used game store. Named after the song, which we talked about earlier, Pac-Man Fever the game came out in 2002 for GameCube and PS2 exclusively in North America. It's a Mario Party clone, and not a very good one. I don't want to be too uncharitable, honestly. I have had a decent amount of fun with it, but you can tell it was somewhat of a haphazardly produced budget title. It's not exactly polished. They also didn't even attempt to cobble a roster together out of Pac-Man characters. Instead, we get Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, and a couple characters from other Namco games, rendered in a truly horrifying chibi style. Are you okay, Reiko Ridge Racer? You're not, quite looking like yourself. In addition to the happy couple, and my personal favorite Pac-Man character, Reiko Nagase from Ridge Racer, the playable roster also includes Astaroth from Soul Calibur, as well as Heihachi and Tiger Jackson from Tekken. I'm probably going to talk about this game more in depth in the future, but for now I'll give you the short version. Game isn't amazing, but it's a fun little oddity, and you can certainly get an amusing evening out of it if you go in with low expectations. Roku TV ports. Roku is a company that makes little tiny streaming boxes, and among the Netflixes and the Disney Pluses you can get on their app stores sits Pac-Man Championship Edition. It looks very similar to the Android version, and according to the description of one gameplay video, which was apparently uploaded by one of the programmers, they seem to share at least some crew, and are probably pretty close. Blinky Clyde name confusion. For reasons far beyond human comprehension, there are a couple of games in which Blinky and Clyde have their names swapped. Utilizing the Pac-Man wiki to piece together a rough timeline, it seems as though this problem is one that gradually set in. While the Hanna-Barbera cartoon and Pac-Land don't actually mix up their names, they do seem to mix up their stated personalities from the original arcade game. Blinky is supposed to be the leader, while Clyde is cowardly, but the Hanna-Barbera cartoon flips them, and the facial expressions the ghosts have in Pac-Land reflects this. Pac-Mania is where things start getting real screwy. According to the Pac-Man wiki, some Japanese arcade flyers for this game mix up the two names, and after some quick internet scouring, I can confirm that that is indeed the case. The internal names for both are also impacted by the error, but this is never actually seen in-game. Until Namco Classic Collection Volume 2, a compilation title released in the arcades that inexplicably flips the two's names in the original Pac-Man arcade game, in addition to Pac-Man arrangement. It feels deliberate now. And they stuck with it. The error continues to apply in every World game up until Pac-Man World Rally set the record straight. Thanks for getting something right, Pac-Man Party. It's been correct ever since, minus a brief lapse in the subtitles to Wreck-It Ralph. Twitter renders. This refers to how the official Pac-Man Twitter, for a time, kept posting brand new renders of Pac-Man even though we haven't gotten a true 3D Pac-Man title in over half a decade. Most of these look quite nice, and at least one of them appears to have been taken from another Twitter user. Good job, Pac-Man Twitter. They even provided a phone wallpaper-sized version of it when asked, while still not crediting the artist. A lot of guts there. Beta World Rally trailer. This is in reference to a trailer for the game Pac-Man World Rally, featured in a few versions of Pac-Man World 3, that apparently features a few differences from the final game. I unfortunately wasn't able to spot any though. Let me know if you guys notice anything. CE Crown. In Pac-Man Championship Edition, the last bonus fruit to appear is a crown, again stretching the definition of what fruit is. In order for you to get this fruit, you need to clear the whole board 11 times, and as a reward, you get an achievement. Pac-Man VR. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Pac-Man VR is a game from 1996 developed by the Virtuality Group, a company who made VR games for arcades in the 90s. This game was what we would call lost media because it was very obscure and is likely difficult to emulate. We do, at the very least, have a video and some photos though, and as expected, it seems to essentially be the original Pac-Man arcade game but in first-person VR. It also apparently had a multiplayer mode, but we don't have details on the subject. My personal favorite artifact is the artwork of Pac-Man we have. It's a weird, primitive, almost cel-shaded looking model, and it's goofy, but I like it. The game is actually no longer lost media, technically, because a company called Virtuosity Systems, who I would imagine has some sort of connection to Virtuality Group, began selling the ROM on their website in 2020. While it does only run on original Virtuality machines, the website notes that a port for new platforms is in the works. Don't know how that's gonna work with Bandai Namco, but I'm eager to see where it goes. Coleco Tabletop. The company Coleco used to put out these LCD handheld adaptations of arcade games in these imitation arcade cabinets. In 1981, they put out a Pac-Man Pac-Man 1, which was the first handheld Pac-Man game of any kind. It's not too different from the modern equivalent, aside from being more vertically oriented and having a red and black color scheme. It was released in Japan under the name Super Puck Monster, and a similar Ms. Pac-Man tabletop was made later on. Laser hitboxes. So in the Game Boy Advance version of the first Pac-Man World game, the lasers in the space levels are noticeably larger than in the PS1 version, which, combined with the game's weird 2D looking like 3D thing, makes these areas infinitely harder. This may or may not have been included on the Iceberg because of the immense strife it caused Sniper King's younger self. Competition Xbox 360. On June 5th, 2007, 10 of the world's greatest Pac-Man players competed in the finals of the first Pac-Man World Championship, wherein titans of the original arcade game went head-to-head in Championship Edition to celebrate that game's release. The winner was Daniel Borrego, who won a completely unique Xbox 360 with Pac-Man art that was signed by Toru Iwatani himself. Pac-Land's US release is based on the Hanna-Barbera series. This one is interesting because, actually, even the Japanese version of Pac-Land is based on the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Pac-Land was created when Namco programmer Yoshihiro Kishimoto was tasked with making a game based off this thing. Apparently, it just wasn't obvious enough, though, and so the American version goes even harder on the Hanna-Barbera theming. Notably, it yanks the feather out of Pac-Man's hat and replaces fairies with the characters Chomp Chomp and Sourpuss from the cartoon. Oh, his family also looks different. Look at that. Look at what they did to Ms. Pac-Man. Look at what they did to the baby. That's not how they look at Japan. Here's how they look at Japan. It's not how they Power Pack. The Pac-Man Power Pack is a compilation of Pac-Man World 2, 3, and Rally for PS2, released in 2008, repackaged as a box set. Each individual game now includes a Bandai Namco logo on the box, and for some reason, World 2 has different disc art than it does on any other release. Sniper King claims it can still be found at Walmart sometimes, and given their reputation for continuing to stock random PS2 games to this day, I wouldn't doubt it. Every Atari owner has at least one Pac-Man title. This is an observation that a friend of Sniper King's made while at a flea market. Essentially, every time someone had Atari games for sale, there would always be some kind of Pac-Man title there, be it the original, Ms. Pac-Man, Junior Pac-Man, whatever. This is also often the case with eBay lots, and after a quick search, I can confirm that it is, if nothing else, very common. Stage 4, ready. Blood in Pac-Man World 2. In the volcano levels from Pac-Man World 2, Pukas from Dig Dug turn up as enemies, and when you kill them, they violently explode into a burst of red liquid which resembles very diluted ketchup, and blood, maybe also blood. Tengen Unlicensed Carts. Tengen, a subsidiary of Atari, was the company that released Pac-Man on NES for the first time, based off of the Famicom version. However, to make a long story short, the first NES release of this game was actually an unlicensed one, due to Tengen not liking Nintendo's release limitations for the platform. You can tell it's unlicensed because of that black, smooth cartridge, which you may also remember from Tengen's version of Tetris on the same platform. This version was re-released in licensed form by Namco in 1993. If you want to know more about these limitations, Sniper King and I would both recommend the Gaming Historian's video on the subject. Misshapen dots. Because of the different screen resolutions on some home ports of the game, the dots apparently aren't the same size. Oh, we're doing the VHS thing from the last video again. Remember, we stopped because I got this wrong. I got this wrong, and I'm gonna tell you why. So it's true that the internal resolution, the weird resolutions that some consoles have, are the reason for this, but not in the way that I explained. So back in the day, the TVs that the NES was designed to work with, the old school TRTs like this one, the 80s TVs, those had a aspect ratio of 4:3, which essentially looks like this. It refers to the horizontal and vertical width and height of the image. It's a relative thing. So the image is slightly wider than it is tall. It looks like this, but it's kind of a square compared to what we have now. The NES's internal resolution, though, the image that the console actually renders out, is technically 256 by 224 pixels, if we're going by the NTSC, that is to say the American and Japanese resolution. And this is 8:7. As you may be able to tell, 8:7 is not 4:3, so you feed this into a TV, and the TV's kind of got to figure out what to do with it. Typically what would happen is the TV would actually refit the 8:7 into 4:3. It would kind of stretch it, and the result of this is that sometimes the pixels would not technically be the same size. Now, because this was the standard display of the time, a lot of games are designed around this. If you play them in their native internal resolution, stuff will look skinny. It won't quite look right because it's supposed to be stretched to 4:3. But I believe believe what this statement is referring to is this type of uneven pixel scaling. Perhaps there are home versions of Pac-Man that do not compensate for the display that they're being played on, and instead are built for the specific internal resolution of the console, which means that the pixel size of the dots might not be consistent the whole way through. I'm gonna leave a link to a video made by a channel called Displaced Gamers that explains how this works in relation to the Super Nintendo, if you want to understand it a little better. But this can apply to a lot of different consoles. PSP levels in World Rally console intro. Essentially, the PSP version of Pac-Man World Rally has an extra course called Subterranean Speedway, which doesn't appear in the other versions of the game, except in the intro, where it's shown for some reason. Maybe this implies it was, at one point, planned for the console version of the game? Who knows? All I know is that it definitely confused at least one kid who tried tirelessly to unlock it. The Death of KC Munchkin. KC Munchkin is a game released in 1981 for the Magnavox Odyssey 2 in America and Europe that takes, shall we say, maybe a bit of inspiration from Pac-Man. Try as designer Ed Averitt did to make the game legally distinct, Atari still filed a lawsuit and ultimately won the case on appeal. This was a landmark case for copyright law in terms of video games, and set a lot of precedent for what you could get away with in terms of making a game that looks and plays like another game. KC Munchkin was actually followed by a sequel, KC's Crazy Chase, which plays similarly but adds a centipede-like enemy called the Dratapillar, which some have theorized was to make absolutely certain Atari couldn't claim this game as infringement as well. Ghost Zone. This one is a whole big thing. Basically, Pac-Man Ghost Zone was a canceled PS1 game that was eventually reworked into Pac-Man World. The Pac-Man wiki has a summation of the game's development that was pieced together from accounts of a bunch of people who worked on the game, and I'll be summarizing that. Part of me wants to make a full video about this at some point, provided there's enough info there, so let me know if you want that. Anyways, basically, Namco Home Tech, a subsidiary of Namco that was based in the US, wanted to make an RPG with a bunch of old school Namco characters. Namco saw this request, spit in the team's face, and basically said, no, go do Pac-Man. And despite forcing the team to work on Pac-Man, Namco was too protective of their precious little baby to let them use the real Pac-Man. So the game's story ended up as follows. A child visits an arcade and he wants to play the fancy new arcade game that everyone absolutely loves. But everyone absolutely loves it so much that he, and we, can't even get a look at it. And eventually he's pushed away by a crowd and told to go play Pac-Man.
Beat it! We were here first. Go play Pac-Man.
I'm noticing some parallels with real life already. He meanders over to the Pac-Man cabinet and starts talking mad shit about it.
Pac-Man? Is this old thing even still here? Nobody ever plays it. No 3D, no fighting, no blood. Where's the fire button? This is so lame. Stupid old game. You stink.
Which makes Blinky, Inky, and a new character named Ghost Lord angry enough to suck the child through the screen and turn him into Pac-Man. The seeds of Wreck-It Ralph are here, and I don't know how to feel about it. I guess I wouldn't know what to do with myself while rotting away in a decrepit, unloved arcade machine either, other than coming up with horrific technology designed for nefarious purposes. Unfortunately, most of the team making this game didn't have a ton of experience, especially on 3D titles, meaning that the game didn't exactly impress Namco's main branch after it was presented to them. In fact, Namco became increasingly more hostile towards the Ghost Zone development team, firing a ton of employees and slashing the development schedule in half before it was canceled altogether. Namco suggested it be remade from scratch, and eventually we got Pac-Man World 1 out of it. Oh, also, like, most of the staff got laid off. Like, most of the people who were working on Ghost Zone lost their jobs because Namco was so furious with the game that they asked this team to make. Honey, I Blew Up the Pac-Man. This is a cheat code for the PC title Pac-Man Adventures in Time. All the sources I've read online say that it makes Pac-Man explode and lose a life, but I went to try it myself, and in reality, when they say blow up, they mean make big. Also, the code is Honey, I Blew Up Pac-Man, not Honey, I Blew Up the Pac-Man, which is unfortunately way funnier. This game actually has a bunch of fun cheat codes, including the corresponding Honey, I Shrunk the Pac-Man, which makes you tiny, and, I'm not making this up, Being Pac-Manovich, which lets you play in a truly awful first-person mode. Orson in World Rally. This refers to a fan theory that Talkman in World Rally is actually operated by Orson, as in the original Pac-Man world. If this isn't the case, then Orson's just straight up not in the game. Jeffrey R. Yee. Jeffrey R. Yee is the name of an 8-year-old from San Francisco who, in 1982, claimed to have set a world record score of 6,131,940 points in the original Pac-Man arcade game. This achievement was so great that he even even received a letter from the then current president of the United States, Ronald Reagan!
Communism makes everyone hungry.
I knew we hadn't seen the last of you, you crotchety old bastard. The only thing that's gonna be trickling down is my piss onto your grave, you fuck. Unfortunately, as mentioned earlier, the highest possible score to obtain in Pac-Man is 3,330,360, which means that Jeffrey R. Yee is a dirty liar! Or he was playing on a modified board, not sure. I think he lied. I don't trust 8-year-olds. Neo Geo PC Cross. In 1999, an apparently very accurate and overall good port of the original Pac-Man was released for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, and it came with this red cross thing. The Pocket Color had a very unique control stick, or clicky stick.
It's the clicky stick.
And the idea was that if you slid this around the stick, it would make the game control a little more accurately. These are, unfortunately, very rare now. Copies which include both the box and the little ring thingy seem to go on eBay for closer to $75 or $100 compared to $20 to $30 for the loose cart. This is probably because these things are pretty easy to lose. I think this anecdote posted by gaming blogger NFG in 2013 sums it up well.
When the Neo Geo Pocket system came out, SNK released two games that were almost completely unsuited for the silly little thumbstick it used for primary input, Crush Roller and Pac-Man. These two games included a little plastic ring that prevented the user from hitting any diagonals, because the wobbly little stick made playing them intensely frustrating. The little plastic ring was very tiny, the size of a thumb tip, and you were guaranteed to lose one within days of buying it, so each game came with two of them. I lost both of mine back in 1999 when the machine was new. They disappeared almost as soon as I opened the box. I barely remember using them. They disappeared so fast. 14 years have passed. I moved house, I sold my game store, I moved to Japan. In 5 years there, I moved house 3 times. Then I moved to Australia and moved house 5 more times over 8 more years. I never saw those little rings again, especially not after losing most of my gaming gear in the Queensland floods of 2011. A few days ago, I found one of these little red things in my driveway covered in mud. It looked like the pull tab from a carton of juice, but I recognized it immediately. Where did it come from? How did it get there? How the hell did it end up in my driveway? 2 continents and 2 countries and 7 houses and damn near 15 years later.
Tommy Tallarico loves Baby Pac-Man. Tommy Tallarico, if you're unfamiliar, is a very prominent video game music composer who helped write the music for a number of titles, including Another World, the Spider-Man game from 2000, the one game about the space swarm made by that bigoted dude.
Did your mom have a penis?
And most importantly for the purposes of this video, Cool Spot, and Pac-Man World 1, and World Rally 2. Anyways, there was a documentary on Tallarico that Sniper King apparently saw on an old PS2 demo disc he used to own, where he shows off his home, and one segment in particular features him showing off his baby Pac-Man arcade machine and calling it one of his favorites. He also mentions that his dad is actually better at it than he is, which I find pretty funny. The documentary in question has been posted to YouTube, so you can watch it if you want, but I'm still unsure of the original source. Was it produced for that demo disc? Which demo disc was it? Who am I? Professor Pac-Man Kids Edition. Apparently, the game Professor Pac-Man, which, if you're unaware, was a quiz game for arcades, was originally going to be released in 3 variations. A public version geared towards arcades and bars, a version which offered prizes for casinos, and a family version which was playable by anyone, but geared towards younger audiences. Only one of these ultimately came out. I actually can't find a very definitive source on this because there's no citation on Wikipedia, and other references to it on the internet don't seem to lead back to any sick development info. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough? Not sure. In any case, the game apparently bombed, which likely killed any possibility of other variations or re-releases. Sorry to all the Professor Pac-Man fans out there. Alright, 1 level to go. You ready? Stage 5! World 3 GC Rarity True Reason. This one refers to how Pac-Man World 3 on the GameCube seems to be pretty uncommon compared to the other versions, and implies that there's some nefarious reason for it. It's a bit of a joke though. I don't think there's a particular reason aside from how PS2 games are generally cheaper than their GameCube counterparts. Obesity Scandal. This is another joke one. Since eating is a prominent part of the franchise, it sounds somewhat plausible at a glance. Gems of Virtue are corrupted Triforce pieces. The Gems of Virtue from Ms. Pac-Man Maze Madness do look a bit like Triforce pieces, don't they? Only green ghosts can rebel. This is something Sniper King noticed as a kid. Miru from Pac and Pal and Orson from the Pac-Man World games were, for a time, the only ghosts who really helped Pac-Man in any kind kind of permanent way. Therefore, only green ghosts can rebel and become good guys. Also, Funky from Pac-Mania can jump, which, if you ask me, is pretty rebellious. Lack of info on Quest for the Golden Maze. There once was a game called Ms. Pac-Man Quest for the Golden Maze, released on PC in the year 2001. It was created by the now defunct company Creature Labs. Apparently, the game is rumored to have been somewhat rare upon release, leading to poor sales, although I can't verify this, and the game seems to be pretty readily available now. The fact that it's apparently tough to run on modern systems doesn't exactly help clear up any of the mystery. Kinky the Scientist. You heard me correctly. In Pac-Man Arrangement, there's a ghost named Kinky. He's gold and he's a scientist, and you know what? I love him. His Japanese name is Kinzo, which means gold. He's not, like, officially a scientist, but look at him. He's a scientist. While there is apparently a fanfic that plops him into the Ghostly Adventures continuity, he has never officially appeared in a game other than Pac-Man Arrangement, unless you count compilations that feature Pac-Man Arrangement. Other than the general obscurity of the character, I would have to imagine that the name plays some kind of role in this decision. Plug-and-play horrors. The input jacks on plug-and-play consoles, which would include Pac-Man ones, have a tendency to deteriorate pretty badly over time, and, according to Sniper King, this can result in some pretty off stuff, like sudden changes in audio levels and graphical distortion, somewhat similarly to cartridge tilting. In his own words, this can be oddly horrifying for a young child. 5-year-old me can confirm. Spooky is the ghost of Mesmeron. Mesmeron is the uncle of the ghosts in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. There's a fan theory that Spooky from Pac-Man World 2 is actually his ghost. I can see the character design similarities, but I kinda doubt that the Hanna-Barbera cartoon and the World games are canon with one another. Sorry to be no fun, but I should listen. I don't know. I could be wrong. Am I wrong? I'm wrong, aren't I? Cannibal Dash. This is a rather disturbing name given to a rather benign minigame from the PC title Pac-Man Adventures in Time. It's somewhat similar to the chase levels from the early Crash games, although seemingly with a better camera. I fail to see where the cannibalism lies. This is on the iceberg mostly because of the name and how out of place it is. Gurgling noises. Toshio Kai was the man who designed the sound for the original Pac-Man arcade game, and in order to explain to him what exactly he wanted, Toru Iwatani came into the design session and began noisily eating fruit and making gargling noises. Waka waka waka. Torture in Ghostly Adventures. This is in reference to the torture inflicted upon the character Butler by his brother, Dr. A.H. Buttocks. Ghostly Adventures really is a trip, you have no idea. Pac-Man no Desktop Daisakusen. Pac-Man no Desktop Daisakusen is an incredibly rare CD-ROM released exclusively in Japan in 1999. It's less of a game and more of a virtual assistant a la Microsoft Agent or Bonzi Buddy. A Pac-Man of quality. For a while, the only copy that had been found and shared online was missing some data, meaning that the Pac-Athlon minigame, which, I mean, is a little bit of a game, was the only thing accessible. That was until March 14th, 2020. Lost Media Wiki forum user Ryan Silberman managed to find a copy on Yahoo Auctions Japan, imported it, and after a little technical hassle, managed to get it installed, sharing it on the Internet Archive. It's now available to try out if you like, although its functionality may vary depending on your OS, especially if you're running something modern. Pac-Man vs. Space Invaders. This is in reference to Space Invaders vs. Pac-Man, quite possibly the most obscure Pac-Man title ever released, and a legitimate case of lost media. Essentially, the game features both Space Invaders and Pac-Man, but with the twist that some characters have switched places. The game was released for Japanese flip phones in 2005 to celebrate Pac-Man's 25th anniversary. Seemingly, the only documentation of the game online are a few wiki mentions and a single screenshot from the Pac-Man wiki. Outro. And with that, we've covered every inch of this Pac-Man landmass. I would again like to thank Sniper King for not only making the iceberg, but also for providing extensive notes on it. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jonii. If you're interested in Pac-Man, you might like my deep dive on the legal situation surrounding Ms. Pac-Man. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Peace. Hey, hi, hello everyone, it's me, Late Night Jonii, and I just wanted to thank you for watching that video I made about the Pac-Man Iceberg. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, so thank you for being patient. I'd like to thank a few of the people who helped it to come together. Obviously, Sniper King 64 deserves a big thank you for making the iceberg chart in the first place and being incredibly helpful with the notes. Couldn't have made this without him. Sniper King also pointed out that there is a song from Pac-Man World Rally from the iceberg level, so you're hearing that right now. Pretty thematically appropriate. appropriate. I'd also like to thank my friends Nick2751 and TheNumenFromPacland for providing their voices. I'll link videos from both of them. I especially recommend you spend some time with Newman so you can learn about the canceled Pac-Man World reboot. Very, very interesting stuff. Oh, also, shout out to KingdomTrekker. I commissioned her to do this cute little sprite of my profile picture for the intermission part, and I thought it came out really nicely. I really like it, so thank you. You should go hit her up on Twitter for commissions. I figured since this was a Pac-Man video, I'd get some Pac-Man fans involved. And speaking of Pac-Man fans, I don't know if I've ever formally done this, but I just want to thank all the Pac-Man fans who saw the Ms. Pac-Man video and reacted so positively. A good portion of my current viewer base came from that video, and so I wanted to make this video partially as a thank you. I probably will cover some more Pac-Man stuff in the future, but you know me. I don't know how long that's gonna take. Speaking of future videos, I don't really know what the schedule is gonna be, but I do have some more stuff planned for this year, so I hope you guys stay tuned. Alright, I'm gonna go pass out. You guys have a good rest of your day, or night, or whatever. Peace.